The great hall of the Galactic Council Station was filled with noise and movement. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of different species had gathered for the annual Peace Summit. They came from every corner of known space, representing empires and federations and collectives that had existed for thousands of years. Ambassador Vethker of the Selenari Dominion stood near the main entrance, watching the delegates arrive. His pale blue skin reflected the light from the massive windows that looked out into space. He had attended many summits over his long career, but this one felt different. There was tension in the air. Something was wrong in the galaxy, and everyone knew it. Ships had been disappearing in the neutral corridor. Entire fleets had vanished without sending distress signals. The Kethvari had lost 17 cargo vessels in the past 3 months. The On Collective had sent a survey fleet to investigate, and no one had heard from them since. Everyone was afraid. Everyone wanted answers. Vethker looked around the chamber and counted the delegations. The Kethvari had sent their full war council, 12 warriors with scales that shifted color based on their emotions. Right now, those scales were dark red, showing anger and fear. The On Collective had sent 3 of their crystal beings, tall and silent and humming with strange energy. The Morthany Federation had sent diplomats and soldiers together. Their forearms folded in gestures of formal greeting. Every major power had sent their best. Military commanders sat beside diplomats. Admirals stood behind ambassadors. This was not just a peace summit anymore. This was a council of war, but one section of the Great Hall remained. Empty, the seats reserved for the human delegation held only one person. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and a simple suit. He sat alone, reading something on a small tablet, apparently unconcerned about the chaos around him. Commander Earl of the Kethvari walked over to Vethker. Her scales were shifting between red and purple, showing confusion mixed with anger. "Where are the humans?" she demanded. "We sent formal invitations to their military high command. We specifically requested their admirals and generals. And they send us one civilian?" Vethker had been wondering the same thing. His name is Daniel Morris. He is a diplomatic representative from Earth, a diplomat. Earl made a sound of disgust. "We are discussing matters of galactic security. Ships are vanishing. Something is hunting us in the dark spaces between stars. And the humans send a single diplomat with no military authority. This is not unusual for them," Vethker said carefully. "In 40 years of interstellar relations, humanity has never sent a military representative to any summit. They always send diplomats. They always come alone." Earl's scales turned darker. "Because they have no military worth sending. Everyone knows this. The humans are traders and scientists. Their ships are cargo haulers and research vessels. They have no weapons, no fleets, no armies." Vethker nodded slowly, but something about that explanation had always bothered him. He remembered the Kethvari incursion 12 years ago. A rogue warlord named Kethmer had attacked a human colony on the edge of explored space. The Selenari had offered to send a peacekeeping fleet. Expecting to find the colony destroyed and its people dead, instead, they had found something impossible: Kethmer's entire armada. 37 warships equipped with the best weapons the Kethvari could build had been reduced to floating debris. The colony was untouched. The humans had already repaired their communication systems and were asking for agricultural supplies as if nothing had happened. No. One knew what had destroyed those ships. The humans claimed it was a local defense initiative. They refused to explain further. They answered no questions. And when the summit was called to discuss the incident, Earth's military representatives were, as always, absent. It had become a joke among the other species. The humans had no military. They were harmless. They were not a threat to anyone. But Vethker had seen the sensor readings from that day. He had seen what was left of Kethmer's flagship. Something had torn through its armor like it was made of paper. Something had killed a warlord who had terrorized 3 star systems. The humans said they knew nothing about it. Vethker did not believe them. He walked across the chamber toward the human section. Daniel Morris looked up from his tablet as he approached, and his face arranged itself into a polite smile. "Ambassador Vethker," Morris said, "it's a pleasure to see you again, Mr. Morris." Vethker sat down in one of the empty chairs beside the human. I had hoped to speak with some of your military commanders at this summit. There are matters of great importance to discuss. I understand completely. Unfortunately, our armed forces were unable to send representatives. They send their apologies. Unable or unwilling. Maurice's smile did not change. I'm afraid I don't understand the question, Ambassador. Vethker leaned closer. Ships are disappearing, Mr. Morris. Not just Kethvari ships. Not just on ships. We have reports from a dozen species. Something is out there in the neutral corridor. Something is killing everyone who enters that region of space. And your people know something about it. Earth shares the galaxy's concern about these incidents. We have lost ships as well. And why do you not help us investigate? Why do you not send your scientists, your analysts, your military experts? Why do you hide behind diplomatic protocols while the rest of the galaxy prepares for war? Maurice was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved across the chamber, taking in the gathered delegates, the armed soldiers, the frightened faces of 100 species. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Ambassador, I want you to understand something. Earth does not send military representatives to these summits because our military is otherwise engaged. Not because we have nothing to send, not because we don't care. Because they are busy with what? The human looked at him, and for just a moment, Vethker saw something behind those calm eyes. Something old and tired and carrying a weight that the ambassador could not begin to understand, with keeping everyone safe. Before Vethker could respond, the summit was called to order. He returned to his own delegation, but he could not stop thinking about what Morris had said. Keeping everyone safe. What did that mean? Safe from what? The first day of the summit passed slowly. Delegates argued about shipping routes and military protocols. The Kethvari demanded action. The On Collective demanded answers. Everyone looked at the single human sitting alone in his section. And everyone wondered why Earth refused to participate in galactic security. That night, Vethker stood on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the dark spaces between civilizations, something was hunting. Ships were vanishing. People were dying. And the humans knew more than they were saying. He did not know that in less than 2 days, he would finally learn the truth. He did not know that the truth would change. Everything the second day of the summit began with bad news. Ambassador? Vethker was eating breakfast in his quarters when his communication device started making emergency sounds. He answered it immediately and found himself looking at the face of Commander Earl. Her scales were completely black, a color he had never seen before. It meant absolute terror. Come to the main chamber, she said. Now, when Vethker arrived, the great hall was in chaos. Delegates were shouting at each other. Security officers were running back and forth. The uncollective representatives were making sounds that shattered glass containers across the room. What happened? Vethker asked. Ireel grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the central display. A holographic map of the galaxy floated in the air, showing the territories of every major civilization. Red dots marked the locations where ships had disappeared. There were many more red dots than yesterday, the on-survey fleet Earl said. We received their final transmission this morning. It was sent 9 days ago. It took this long to reach us because of the distance. What did they say? Earl touched a control, and the chamber filled with sound. It was the most horrible sound Vethker had ever heard. The crystal voices of the On beings were screaming, their harmonics breaking apart into pure noise. Behind their screams, there was something else. A deep vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. A sound like space itself was being torn apart. Then silence. 42 ships, Earl said quietly. 2,000 on crew members. Gone. Vethker felt cold. The On were not weak. Their ships were made of the same crystal material as their bodies, nearly indestructible. Their weapons could crack planets. If something had destroyed 42 On vessels without even letting them send a proper distress signal, then nothing in the galaxy was safe. He looked across the chamber and saw Daniel Morris standing near the human section. The diplomat was speaking quietly into his personal communicator, his face showing no emotion at all. He did not look surprised. He did not look afraid. He looked like a man who had heard this kind of news many times before. Vethker pushed through the crowd of panicking delegates and approached the human. Maurice ended his communication and put the device away. "You knew this was going to happen," Vethker said. "I suspected it might." "Then why did you not warn them? Why did you not tell the On Collective that their fleet was flying into danger?" Morris was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the chaos continued. The Kethvari delegation was demanding immediate military action. The Morthani were calling for an emergency evacuation of the station. Everyone was afraid. Ambassador Morris said finally, "If I had warned the On, they would have sent a larger fleet. More ships, more weapons, more soldiers, and they all would have died, just like this survey fleet. The size of the force does not matter. Your weapons cannot hurt what killed those ships. Then what can?" Maurice did not answer. He simply looked at Vethker with those calm, tired eyes. And the ambassador understood that the human would not say anything more. The emergency session that followed was the most difficult summit meeting Vethker had ever attended. Every delegate wanted answers. Every delegate wanted action. And every delegate eventually turned to look at the single human sitting alone in his section. "We demand to speak with Earth's military commanders," said High Admiral Korath of the Selenari. "This is no longer a matter of diplomatic protocol. This is a matter of survival." Maurice stood up slowly. Every eye in the chamber was on him. "I understand your concerns," he said. "I have communicated them to my government. Unfortunately, our military forces are currently engaged in operations that cannot be interrupted. I am not authorized to discuss the nature of those operations." "Cannot be interrupted?" Korath's voice was rising. "While ships vanish across the galaxy? While entire fleets disappear without explanation? What could possibly be more important than this? I cannot answer that question." The chamber exploded with anger. Delegates shouted accusations at the human. Some demanded that Earth be expelled from the galactic community. Others called for sanctions against human trade ships. The Kethvari suggested that Maurice himself should be arrested until Earth provided answers. Through it all, the human diplomat remained calm. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply stood there, absorbing their anger like a rock absorbing waves. That night, Vethker found Morris alone on an observation deck, the same one where they had spoken the day before. The human was looking out at the stars, his reflection visible in the transparent wall. "They hate you now," Vethker said. "The other delegates, they think Earth is hiding something that could save lives." "They're right." Morris did not turn around. "We are hiding something. Then why? Why keep secrets while people die?" Morris was quiet for so long that Vethker thought he would not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, more honest. "Ambassador, do you know why Earth never sends military representatives to these summits? Because you have no military. Everyone knows this. Everyone assumes this."
Ow.
Morris turned to face him. "There is a difference between knowing and assuming. Your people, the Kethvari, the On, all of you have assumed for 40 years that humanity has no armed forces. You see our cargo ships and our research vessels, and you think that is all we have, is it not?" Morris smiled, but there was no happiness in it. "Ambassador, in approximately 18 hours, something is going to happen at this station. Something that will change everything you think you know about humanity. I am telling you this because you have been kind to me, and because I believe you deserve a warning." "What kind of warning?" "When it happens, get everyone to the central core of the station. Seal the emergency doors. And whatever you see, whatever you hear, do not interfere." Before Vethker could ask more questions, Maurice walked away. Disappearing into the corridors of the station, the ambassador stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. He thought about the Kethvari incursion 12 years ago. He thought about Kethmer's armada, torn apart by unknown weapons. He thought about the 42 on ships that had vanished into silence, and he thought about the quiet human diplomat who seemed to know far more than he was saying. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. Vethker could feel it in his bones. The alarm started screaming at exactly 1400 hours. Station time. Vethker was in the main chamber when the emergency lights turned everything red. Around him, delegates stopped their arguments and looked up at the ceiling, confusion on their faces. The sound was unlike anything he had heard before. It was not the alarm for fire or decompression or enemy attack. It was something else. Something worse. A voice came over the station's communication system. Unknown contact detected. All personnel, to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Commander Errol grabbed Vethker's arm. What is happening? Is it an attack? Before he could answer, the main display screen activated, showing a view of space outside the station. At first, Vethker saw nothing unusual. Stars, empty space. The distant lights of ships waiting to dock. Then the stars began to disappear. Something was blocking them out. Something huge and dark was moving through space toward the station. It did not appear on any sensors. It made no sound. It simply swallowed the light of every star in its path. Get a visual, someone shouted. What is that thing? The station's external cameras focused on the approaching darkness. What Vethker saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. It was alive. That was the only way to describe it. A massive creature made of flesh and metal and something else that hurt to look at directly. It stretched across space like a living mountain, 8 kilometers from one end to the other. Tentacles of pure darkness reached out from its body, touching the fabric of reality and leaving wounds where they passed. The thing had no eyes that Vethker could see. No mouth, no recognizable features at all. But somehow he knew it was aware of them. He could feel its attention like a weight pressing down on his mind. By the ancestors, Errol whispered. Her scales had turned white, a color he had never seen on a Kethvari before. What is that? No one had an answer. The station's defense systems activated automatically. Plasma cannons emerged from hidden ports and began firing at the creature. Missiles launched from defense platforms and flew toward the massive shape. Energy beams crossed the space between the station and the monster. Nothing worked. The weapons hit the creature and did nothing. The plasma bolts were absorbed into its flesh without leaving marks. The missiles exploded against its surface and disappeared like raindrops falling into an ocean. The energy beams bent and twisted as they approached, pulled off course by forces that should not exist. The creature did not even slow down. Evacuation, someone screamed. We need to evacuate now. Ships began undocking from the station. Diplomatic vessels and transport crafts separated from their ports and tried to flee. The creature noticed them. One of its tentacles reached out, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move, and touched the nearest ship. The ship did not explode. It did not break apart. It simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, carrying 40 crew members toward safety. The next moment it was gone, as if it had never been. Vethker remembered what Maurice had said. Get everyone to the central core. Seal the emergency doors. Whatever you see, do not interfere. Everyone follow me, he shouted, to the central core. Now, he did not wait to see if anyone obeyed. He ran toward the center of the station, his legs moving faster than they had in years. Behind him, he heard others following. Errol was shouting orders to her soldiers. The unrepresentatives were vibrating at frequencies that made his teeth hurt. They reached the central core, just as another ship was destroyed outside. Vethker hit the emergency seal button, and massive doors began closing around them. Through the narrowing gap, he saw Daniel Morris running in the opposite direction, toward the outer sections of the station. Vethker shouted. This way. You'll be killed. The human diplomat did not stop. He did not even turn around. He disappeared into a corridor, and the doors sealed shut behind him. Inside the core, 40 delegates from a dozen species huddled together in fear. The station shook as the creature drew closer. Through the internal sensors, they could see its shadow falling over the docking ports, its tentacles reaching toward the hull. This is how we die, Vethker thought. This is how the galaxy ends. Then something changed. A flash of light erupted outside the station. Not weapon fire. Not an explosion. Something else. Something that felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. The internal sensors showed ships appearing from nowhere. Not coming out of faster-than-light travel. Not emerging from wormholes. Simply appearing as if they had always been there and were only now choosing to be seen. Dozens of ships. Human ships? They were unlike any vessels Vethker had ever seen. Sleek and deadly, covered in weapon systems that glowed with strange energy. Their hulls were marked with symbols that shifted and changed when he tried to focus on them. They moved through space with impossible grace, as if the laws of physics were suggestions they had chosen to ignore. At the center of the human fleet was a ship that matched the creature in size. It was enormous, bristling with weapons, radiating power that made the station's sensors flicker and die. A voice came over the communication system. It was calm and professional and completely human. "This is Admiral Patricia Warren of the Earth Defense Coalition vessel Vigilant Resolve. All non-combatants are advised to remain in shelter. We will handle this situation." The human fleet engaged the creature. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration of power that made everything Vethker knew about warfare seem like children playing with toys. The human ships fired weapons that should not exist. Beams of concentrated gravity tore through the creature's tentacles, cutting them like knives through water. Missiles phased in and out of reality, appearing inside the creature's body and detonating from within. Ships moved in formations so precise that they seemed to share a single mind, dodging attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. The creature fought back. It destroyed 3 human ships in the first few minutes, crushing them with waves of dark energy. But every time it killed a ship, the others adapted. They changed their tactics. They found new weaknesses. They pressed the attack with a determination that bordered on madness. 17 minutes after it began, the battle was over. The creature was dead. Its massive body drifted through space in pieces, already beginning to dissolve into nothing. The human fleet moved through the debris field, collecting samples and searching for survivors. In the central core of the station, Vethker sat down heavily on the floor. His legs would not support him anymore. Around him, the other delegates were equally stunned. For 40 years, they had believed humanity had no military. They had been wrong. Admiral Patricia Warren came aboard the station 2 hours after the battle ended. She was a tall woman in her late 50s, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much to ever be surprised again. She wore a uniform that Vethker did not recognize, dark blue with silver markings that seemed to glow faintly in the light. 2 officers followed her, both carrying weapons that looked nothing like any gun the ambassador had ever seen. The delegates had gathered in the main chamber again. The Great Hall was damaged now, with cracks in the walls and broken equipment scattered across the floor. But everyone who had survived was present. Sitting in whatever seats were still functional, Daniel Morris stood near the entrance, waiting for the Admiral. When she arrived, he nodded to her once. She nodded back. There was a familiarity between them that suggested they had worked together for a very long time. Warren walked to the center of the chamber and stopped. She looked around at the gathered delegates, her face showing no emotion at all. "I apologize for the disruption to your summit," she said. Her voice was strong and clear, filling the room without effort. "These incidents have been increasing in frequency over the past several months. My forces have been stretched thin attempting to contain them." Commander Irel stood up. Her scales were still pale, not yet recovered from the terror she had experienced. "What was that thing? What attacked us? We call them devourers. They exist in the spaces between dimensions, in the gaps between reality and something else that we do not understand. They feed on energy. Life energy. Star energy. The energy of inhabited worlds." Warren paused. "They have been probing our region of the galaxy for approximately 70 years. The chamber was completely silent. Vethker felt like the floor had dropped away beneath his feet. 70 years. The humans had known about these creatures for 70 years. "You knew," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "All this time, you knew about these monsters and you said nothing." Warren turned to look at him. "We said nothing because there was nothing you could do. Your weapons cannot harm them. Your ships cannot outrun them. Your defenses cannot detect them until it is far too late. She raised her hand, and a holographic display appeared in the air above her. It showed a map of the galaxy, covered in red dots. These are the incursion points we have identified over the past 7 decades. Points where devourers have entered our dimension from wherever they come from. We maintain constant patrols in all of these areas. We intercept threats before they can reach populated systems. We have been doing this for 70 years, without rest, without recognition, without thanks. Why? Errol demanded. Why would you sacrifice so much for species who did not even know you existed? Warren was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, because someone had to. When we first encountered these creatures, we did not know what they were. They destroyed 3 of our colonies before we developed weapons that could hurt them. 17 million people died while we learned how to fight. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate in turn. We could have warned you then. We could have told the galaxy about the threat and asked for help. But we knew what would happen if we did. Panic would spread faster than any fleet could contain. Wars would break out over resources and safe territory. Civilizations that had been peaceful for centuries would turn on each other out of fear. The galaxy would tear itself apart before the Devourers ever had a chance to finish the job. So you chose to fight alone, Vethker said. We chose to protect. Warren's voice hardened. There is a difference. Every missing ship, every mysterious incident, every unexplained phenomenon in the dark spaces between your territories, that was us, fighting, dying, holding the line so that the rest of the galaxy could continue to live in peace. High Admiral Korath of the Selenari stood up slowly. He was an old soldier, a veteran of 3 wars, and Vethker had never seen him look as shaken as he did now. How many? Korath asked. How many humans have died protecting us? Warren did not hesitate. In 70 years? Approximately 4 million service members, 843 combat vessels, 17 battle stations, and 1 colony world that we could not reach in time. 14 million civilians. We remember their names. The chamber was silent. Vethker thought about the jokes he had heard over the years. The humans have no military. The humans are harmless. The humans are not a threat to anyone. They had been protecting the galaxy since before most of the delegates in this room were born. Why tell us now? Errol asked. After 70 years of secrets, why reveal the truth today? Daniel Morris stepped forward. His face was tired, but there was something like relief in his eyes. Because it is time, he said. The Devourers are becoming more active, more aggressive, more numerous. For 70 years, Earth has held the line alone. We cannot do it forever. We need help. The galaxy needs to know the truth so that we can face this threat together. Warren nodded. We have been waiting for this moment. Fighting alone was never the goal. It was just necessary until the rest of the galaxy was ready to stand beside us. One by one, the delegates began to stand. Korath was first, his hand pressed to his chest in the Selenari gesture of deepest respect. Errol followed, her scales shifting to colors that meant honor and gratitude. The On representatives began humming frequencies that made the air vibrate with something that felt like, ah! Prayer. Vethker stood last. He looked at Admiral Warren, this tired woman who had spent her life protecting people who did not even know she existed. And he felt ashamed of every assumption he had ever made about humanity. What do you need from us? He asked. Warren smiled for the first time since she had arrived. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it changed her entire face. We need allies. We need resources. We need the galaxy to stop hiding from the darkness and start fighting back. She raised her hand, and the holographic map shifted, showing the positions of her fleet scattered across known space. My people are exhausted. We have been at war for 70 years, and we are reaching the limits of what we can do alone. If the other civilizations are willing to learn, willing to fight, willing to stand together against this enemy, then maybe, just maybe, we can win. And if we are not willing? Korath asked. Warren's smile faded. then the Devourers will avenge too. Ally break through our lines. They will consume your worlds one by one, and everything you have built over thousands of years will disappear as if it never existed. The choice was clear. The galaxy could stand together, or it could fall alone. Vethker knew which option he preferred. The days that followed the revelation were the most important in galactic history. Ships arrived at the station from every corner of known space. The news had spread faster than anyone expected. Military commanders and government leaders came to hear the truth for themselves, to see the recordings of the battle, to meet the humans who had been protecting them for 7 decades. Vethker had never seen anything like it. Species that had been enemies for centuries sat together in the same room. Old grudges were forgotten. Ancient conflicts were set aside. In the face of a threat that could destroy everything, the petty disagreements of the past seemed meaningless. Admiral Warren spent most of her time in briefings, explaining the nature of the Devourers to military leaders from dozens of civilizations. She showed them sensor data, tactical analyses, and decades of research that Earth had conducted in secret. She taught them about the creatures' weaknesses, their patterns, their vulnerabilities. They are not invincible, she said during one session that Vethker attended. They can be hurt. They can be killed. But it requires weapons that operate on principles most species have never explored. We will share our technology. We will train your crews. But it will take time. How much time? Asked a Morthani general. Years, maybe decades. The Devourers have been quiet for the past few months, but they will return. They always return. We need to be ready when they do. The work began immediately. Human engineers arrived at the station to begin upgrading its defenses. Training programs were established for crews from every species. Research teams were formed to study the remains of the Devourer that had been destroyed. Looking for new weaknesses to exploit, Vethker found himself working closely with Daniel Morris during these days. The diplomat was different now. The calm mask he had worn during the summit was gone, replaced by an honesty that made him seem like a completely different person. "Were you always a diplomat?" Vethker asked one evening, as they reviewed supply requests together. Morris smiled. "No, I served in the fleet for 20 years before I transferred to the diplomatic corps. I fought in the second incursion campaign. Lost a lot of friends." "Why did you change to diplomacy?" "Because someone needed to. The fleet needed people who understood the enemy, who could explain our mission to civilian leaders without revealing too much. I volunteered. It was not the career I planned, but it was necessary." Necessary. That word kept appearing in conversations with humans. They did not talk about glory or honor or victory. They talked about necessity, about duty, about doing what needed to be done because no one else could do it, Commander. Eril approached Vethker one day while he was observing the training exercises. Human instructors were teaching Kethvari pilots how to fly in the close formations that Earth's fleet used against the Devourers. "I owe you an apology," Eril said. Her scales were a soft blue color that Vethker had never seen before. It meant humility. For what? For every time I mocked the humans? For every joke I made about their lack of military power? For every assumption I made about their weakness? She watched the pilots training, her eyes following the complex maneuvers. They were never weak. They were just fighting a different war. A harder war. And they never asked for recognition. "They are a strange species," Vethker agreed. "They are the best of us," Eril said quietly. They saw a threat that could destroy everything. And instead of running, instead of hiding, instead of looking out for only themselves, they chose to protect everyone, even species they had never met. Even civilizations that might have been their enemies in other circumstances. Vethker nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing. A month after the battle, a ceremony was held in the main chamber of the station. Representatives from every major civilization gathered to sign a document that had been drafted over weeks of negotiations. It was called the Unity Accord, and it established a formal alliance against the Devourer threat. Admiral Warren stood at the front of the chamber, watching as delegate after delegate added their signatures to the document. When it was done, She stepped forward to address the assembly. 70 years ago, humanity faced a choice. We could have warned the galaxy about the Devourers and watched as fear tore everything apart. We could have focused on protecting only our own worlds and let everyone else face the darkness alone. Instead, we chose a third path. We chose to fight in secret, to sacrifice in silence, to protect without expecting gratitude. She paused, looking around at the gathered delegates. That time is over now. The secret has been revealed. The alliance has been formed. From this day forward, we will face the Devourers together, not as humans and aliens, not as separate species with separate interests, as one galaxy, one people, united against an enemy that wants to destroy everything we have built. The chamber erupted in applause. Species that had never agreed on anything before were standing together, united by a common purpose. Vethker found himself standing next to Daniel Morris as the ceremony concluded. The human diplomat looked tired, but there was a peace in his eyes that had not been there before. "Is this what you always hoped for?" Vethker asked. Morris nodded slowly. "We always knew this day would come. We always hoped that when the truth was revealed, the galaxy would choose to stand with us instead of turning against us. For 70 years, we held the line alone. Now, finally, we have allies. You never doubted? Never worried that we would reject you?" Morris smiled. "Of course, we worried. We worried every single day, but we kept fighting anyway, because that is what humans do. We hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and never stop trying to protect the people we care about." Outside the station, the combined fleet of a dozen civilizations hung in space, training together, learning to fight as one. Human ships flew alongside Selenari cruisers and Kethvari destroyers and on crystal vessels. Different designs, different technologies, different crews, all working toward the same goal. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Devourers waited. They would return. They always returned. But this time, when they came, they would not find humanity standing alone. This time, they would find a galaxy united, a galaxy prepared, a galaxy ready to fight back. And finally, after 70 years of silent sacrifice, Earth's armed forces would have allies at their side. The war was far from over. The hardest battles were still to come. But for the first time in human history, humanity would not face the darkness alone. They would face it together, with their allies, with their friends, with a galaxy that finally understood why Earth's armed forces had always been absent from peace summits. They had been too busy keeping the peace, and now, together, they would finish what they started.